Yak e Yagi, good day, and welcome to today's roundtable discussion with Sealaska directors on the blood quantum resolution. My name is Penny Gage, and I was asked to moderate today's discussion. Tlinget chena kwasiya aya aksai, dleitka chena Penny, yuchat duasak, tlinedina chatsiti, dleitka yari ayachat, shitka kwan, awayuchan, Anchorage yechat yati. Gunalchish. My Tlingit name is Kwasia. My English name is Penny Gage. My parents are Amelia Keto and Steve Gage. My mother's family is Tlingit from the Raven Dog Salmon clan, Japanese and white, and my father is white. His family is from Western Europe. My maternal grandparents were Sam and Amelia Keto of Petersburg, and my paternal grandparents are Doris and James Gage. I grew up in Sitka, and I currently live in Anchorage on Denina land. So I'm really excited about this conversation today that we're going to have. Hopefully you all have received your proxy, aka your ballot, in the mail, or you plan to vote online. This issue of who is Native enough is really important, not only to our people and our corporation, but across the state, across Indian country, worldwide. This is a topic that is garnered a lot of attention and interest. I have a 3-month-old baby, and I wonder how she will connect with our culture and our corporation and my tribe as she grows up. And I was discussing this issue this morning with my mother, who is Tlingit and here to help out with the baby. And we talked about how this issue, she framed it interestingly as trusting the next generation, the next generations. So we have an hour together. Here's a quick snapshot of our agenda. We're going to have a blood quantum presentation by Sealaska President and CEO Anthony Malott. And then we will spend about 30 minutes with Sealaska directors coming into the conversation about this issue of blood quantum and what all shareholders will be voting on this year. And finally, we want to try and answer some questions from shareholders. So please type your questions into the chat, and we will try and capture those and try and address as many of those as we can toward the end. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anthony Malott, who's going to provide some historical background and current information on this issue. Anthony?
Thank you so much, Penny, for being with us and making that introduction. Really excited about this session, to hear from the board in regard to why this is on the election ballot this year. And just so many great answers, so much commitment to listening to our shareholder voice that went into this decision. And so I will kick off with the presentation that we have been utilizing with our shareholder base, just to make sure that there's full understanding of the implications of this, what looks like a fairly simple change. And so this is material straight from your proxy, and we want to highlight that the information in your proxy is very important to walk through. It's inclusive of a pro voice, a con voice, and it includes a letter from the board highlighting why they have decided to recommend a yes vote. And simply put, if you can see this fine writing, what the strikeout, what the yes vote does is it strikes out the need to prove you are 1/4 degree or more Alaska Native. That's what it does for the Class D descendant stock. And so it doesn't mean that non-natives can become shareholders by striking that, and there is some confusion around that. Removing blood quantum as eligibility means that we are now proving your blood quantum through lineal descent. That's one of the reasons, and I'll walk through 4 reasons why myself personally am excited about this action. One, it came from the voice of our shareholders. For all my time at Sealaska, we have heard from grandparents, we've heard from parents, we've heard from youth that this eligibility requirement does not define their nativeness and actually leaves many out. And we made sure over the last year to talk with our shareholder base, to hear from you, get your input. And it was the shareholder input that really drove this. Another reason is that we are following Tlingit and Haida Central Council's lead on this. Tlingit and Haida has already dropped 1/4 degree blood quantum from their eligibility to become a tribal citizen. You still have to be of Tlingit and Haida descent, just like in regard to proving that you are an original descendant that will be maintained under a yes vote. But when I've heard them speak, again, just like we've heard from our shareholders, blood quantum does not define their tribal citizen base. They believe that it is a tool of the federal government that had probably poor historical reasons to exist in the first place, but today has no reason to exist to define their tribal citizens. And they believe that inclusion makes them stronger. More tribal citizens makes TNH stronger. And that's my third reason. That I truly believe that inclusion makes Sealaska stronger as well. Inclusion fits our values. And lastly, I've thought about this a lot. Inclusion is healing. It's healing to know that our future generations will continue to be engaged and involved in this corporation and not feel left out. And those reasons really carry the day from our shareholder voice to this point. And as we walk into some of the finer details, right now, become a descendant shareholder, you have to include the date of birth and social security number of your relation who is an original shareholder. You have to include your birth certificate, and you have to prove that you have enough native blood. This certificate of Indian blood from the BIA has to be included. Again, if the resolution passes, you still have to prove that you are a lineal relation or descendant of original shareholder. You still have to provide your original birth certificate to prove that. But now you don't have to go to the BIA to have that CDIB card for that final step. You still have native blood. You still are related to an original shareholder. And again, it's been a request from our shareholders. When we think about what is the potential number of new shareholders, there's so many ways to look at this, and we've done a lot of research. But in our mind, history is the greatest example. The shareholders already voted with their values. Shareholders already voted for inclusion when they allowed the creation of the Class D descendant stock in 2007. And at that point in time, we estimated that there could be 12,500 eligible descendants over 15 years. And 15 years later, we've only enrolled 6,300 new shareholders, new descendant class shareholders. So our original estimates were high. I think that was probably appropriate. We want to be a bit cautious in our estimates. Right now, we believe that there is up to 17,000 potential eligible descendants, but that's over a very long time period, probably 20 to 30 years until we see that number. The more immediate eligible number is around 8,500. We believe that there can be up to 8,500 new shareholders within the first 6 years of removing blood quantum as an eligibility. And I'll just quickly go over again a lesson from our history. This is dividend dilution from the original Class D inclusion of allowing descendants to get 100 shares of life estate stock. The downdraft here was because of tough markets and operational issues. But what I want to highlight is that even with dilution from the original Class D descendants, operational and business success has allowed us to increase dividends even with facing dilution. And we believe that with our focus on business income, that we can offset the dilution that we may face from this vote of the shareholders. I'll just highlight two ways that we plan to offset the impact of dilution on dividends. And there's another slide that highlights that original shareholders are the least diluted, but I'll get to that when I get to that slide. The MBY Permanent Fund, which provides the investment dividend portion to shareholders, it was $2 per share in 2021. The board has made the decision to add $25 million to the permanent fund and potentially more. We have a great source of that income from our carbon program. Our carbon program is a long-term program, and investments or additions to the permanent fund is also a long-term investment for current and future shareholders. With this $25 million addition, we don't believe we will see dilution of this $2 amount that we saw in 2021. On the operating side, again, we have a business strategy that is very focused on growing income, which grows dividends. And we've shown that over the last 5 or 6 years. We provided $5.62 from operations in 2021. That totals $7.62 per share for 2021. The total dollar amount was just short of $20 million that have come from the success of our businesses and all of our income sources. There will most likely be a decline in the operating dividend in the early years, but just like we showed after the original Class D vote, we believe over time, our business income will be able to grow the dividend and offset dilution. This is the slide I was talking about. When we stepped into this, we wanted to affect the original shareholders and their elders to the least degree possible with these votes. That was a real priority. And at the same time that the shareholders voted to allow Class D descendant stocks in, they also voted to create Class E elder stock. So when an original shareholder reaches the age of 65, they get an extra 100 shares of Class E elder stock. Original shareholders also get the elder trust settlement benefit of $2,000 when they turn the age of 65. These are significant ways that original shareholders will not face significant dilution. And further, original shareholders are the only ones that benefit from ANCSA Section 7I, which becomes 7J payments directly to urban and at-large shareholders and our village shareholders. This is not diluted for original shareholders. And because it is such a big part of the dividend, again, it's a reason why we believe original shareholders are least diluted in this regard. Also, original shareholders are the only ones that have the right to gift will their stock. The descendant stock, which this speaks to, and it allows more descendant stocks to be eligible, is a life estate stock. It passes with them. They cannot gift or inherit. So very significant benefits that original shareholders maintain. And I'll just highlight, it's been posed that why don't we just stick with gifting and inheritance? And I believe that we've heard from shareholders that gifting is something that makes them feel good, and gifting can still be utilized of your original shares for sure. But right now, gifting is not happening to a degree that creates the inclusion that we're looking for, that our shareholders are telling us that they are looking for. Of all gifted shares and inherited shares, only 7%, this is not of our whole entire base, just of original shares that have been gifted or inherited, only 7% of that is held by descendants with blood quantum lower than 1/4. We believe there are many more shareholders that are eligible that are not shareholders through gifting. The gifting is not reaching many additional shareholders. So this concept of leaving shareholders behind right now, or closing the door on shareholders because we have this quarter blood quantum eligibility requirement, matches up with that gifting and inheritance alone is not achieving what we're looking for. Also, it makes a difference whether you get your shares when you're 18 or if you've waited most of your life to get your shares. There are many shareholders that don't become shareholders through gifting or inheritance until they're in their 40s and 50s. That's a long time period to be left out. And gifting also creates dilution. So if you ask an original shareholder to gift their shares, they are diluting themselves. They end up with fewer shares. And then the shareholder that they're gifting to has less than 100 shares as well. And so these are reasons why gifting and inheritance, which is good, we recommend gifting and inheritance and support that, but gifting and inheritance alone will continue to leave many behind. I look forward to continuing this conversation with all of you. I look forward to hearing from our board of directors who have led this effort, listening to our shareholders and expressing what they hear from our shareholder base. And I thank you for your participation today. Gunakashish, how
Gunakashish, Anthony, for that information. These are complex topics, and I learn something new every time I see this information presented. A lot of things that happened in Congress, that happened through other shareholder resolutions, and it's always good for a refresher on where we are and some of the statistics. So we're going to move into a bit of a roundtable discussion with our board of directors. So would ask them to turn their video on if they haven't already. And I'll throw out a question to Vicky Sobolov and Lakwanai about why is this resolution on the proxy right now, on the ballot this year?
Did you throw that question to Vicky first?
Either of you, whoever wants to jump in.
Vicky, I want to defer to you if you wanted to start off.
Looks like she's having technical challenges with video and mute. It wouldn't be a Zoom call without,
All right.
without
There we
a
go.
technical challenge there. now we hear you.
Okay, if you don't mind, Penny, I apologize. Could you just quickly repeat the question because I was trying to get the technology straight.
Why is this resolution on the proxy right now? Why now?
Well, as Anthony said, the resolution had discussion for this resolution began in 2007, and actually prior to that, when the board brought forward the prior resolution to open enrollment to descendants. And at that time, it was discussed that they would present that resolution with the 1/4 blood quantum, but would be looking at it later because it was recognized that even with that action, it would need to be readdressed. And at that time in 2007, that vote passed with the shareholders by over 56% of the voting shares. So it was a clear message by over half of the shareholders at the time that they wanted to include their descendants. So again, historically, blood quantum was used by the federal government to limit the benefits that they were required to provide to Indigenous people. And then it got picked up and was used by many tribes to determine who would be eligible for enrollment to their enrollment list. So now that Sealaska has been in existence for 50 years and ANCSA has been also again in existence for 50 years, the company felt it was time to look at the issue again. The Sealaska has set a goal of operating and being successful for at least the next 100 years, and obviously want to continue on into the future for many, many years beyond that. And so this makes sense that we would be looking at expanding and allowing shareholders who currently do not qualify to be included. So I think it's just really coincides with the goals of the company for long-term existence, and after 50 years of ANCSA and approximately 15 years after the first resolution was passed, this is time now to re-examine this issue. And our values do emphasize patience. Our values also emphasize generosity and holding each other up. I think that this resolution follows along with those values that I mentioned. There are, of course, several others. Thank you.
I'll just jump in there after Vicky. Vicky. When I think about this resolution and its timing, I think about that it's long since been time. As Vicky said, back in 2007, this was already being discussed. At the inception of ANCSA, Congress had written into ANCSA a couple extermination clauses. One of them was the 1991 issues that came up, and that created descendant stock in the first place, stopped us from being able to go public with our shares, created the special elder class as well. But had our leaders at the time not fought for those amendments to go through, ANCSA would have self-terminated. It was written into the bill to do that. The other extermination clause that was included in ANCSA was blood quantum. And that wasn't something that our people chose. That was something that was put upon us. And so now we have the opportunity in the year 2022 to try to right that wrong. And so I think that the timing is now. The timing has been now for many years. And this is an opportunity for us to, as shareholders, because while this resolution is here, this is a determination that all the shareholders will make. And every single shareholder's vote counts the same in terms of having the ability to weigh in, depending, of course, on what their voting opportunity is with their shares. And so we have, as shareholders, the ability to make this choice. So the other component for timing to me is that we're already living in this time where we have so many of our own relatives who do not meet the federal blood quantum requirement already. This extermination clause will happen if we do not address it ourselves. And we're the only ones now with the power to do that. So the time is now, the time has been now. And I think it's really important for us to think about that, that long-term vision that Vicky was mentioning as well. Like, we're shareholders of this company. And so from a corporate standpoint, we could say, but I own this company now. But I think from our native perspective and from our native values, we actually really think about, to play on that quote that we know so well, that we're only borrowing this corporation from our children. And it's our opportunity to make things right for them coming up. Goodness, Chishawa, for the question.
Wow, wonderful words. Gunachi, Shlagana, and Vicky. Bring a couple other directors into the conversation. This question's addressed to Nicole Hallingstad and Cahill Juice. How does the board feel that this resolution will add value to Sealaska, to the company? And whoever wants to jump in. If you're speaking, Cahill Juice, you're on mute. Oh, she's pointing to Nicole. Maybe.
Thank you. Thank you, Penny, for the question and for the chance to have this opportunity to talk with our shareholders and answer some of their questions. I just want to reiterate what you've heard before, and that is that there has already been a shareholder vote on the decision to open up our wings, wrap our raven and our eagle wings, as a shareholder said in Seattle in our meeting just this last weekend, around our children and our grandchildren, to open up that blanket true to our values and encourage those who have simply been born after 1971 to join Sealaska. So that vote has passed by our shareholders. This vote puts the question again to our shareholders: should we just make it lineal descendancy, not have a blood quantum requirement, but simply make it lineal descendancy of an original shareholder, just like our internship and scholarship programs? I believe there is a great deal of benefit in including our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the generations to come, not only because it's what our ancestors have taught us is the right cultural value to follow, but we then have continuing generations of active, concerned, informed, engaged shareholders who will be running this company for the next 100 years, next 500 years, because we certainly plan to be here that long. People can have a difference of opinion over how you define value. What is of value to the corporation? We've already heard from our president, Anthony, who said, it's our responsibility to keep this company profitable enough to continue paying dividends and distributions to our shareholders. We pick up that responsibility and carry it forward. But we also have a responsibility to include our young people so that as time goes on and generations pass, we have a really vibrant body of shareholders able to carry our company into the future. And, just as a side note, when you open your doors in this way, there are that many more shareholders who are eligible to run for the board of directors, that much more talent, brilliance, native creativity and innovation that is brought to the table through those voices of shareholders engaging in participation committees who can cast their own votes in shareholder elections. So I see all of that as bringing huge value to the corporation as it keeps us thriving and viable for 7 generations to come.
Thank you, Nicole. That was well said. And we are here today, I think, being able as directors to directly say to our shareholders something that the majority of the board has agreed upon, something that we support. And I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by a majority of directors who embrace common values that I do. And there's business people on our board, well educated. There's 3 attorneys. I mean, we're just educated. We've gone off and done all of these wonderful things, but yet we retained what was probably the single most important cultural value, and that is our future generations. Penny, congratulations on the baby. I didn't know you had a baby. That is the best news in the universe. But you today mentioning that, explain to me and explain what I've heard. I was in Seattle, and the overwhelming support was from the aunties, the uncles, the nannies, the chinas, the family member. It was the extended family who got up and said, this is what we want, and this is why we want it. We are educating our children. They're getting well educated, but hey, we're also learning our language. We're learning our stories, our song, our dance. That's who we are. We're a very unique organization. We're not IBM. We're Sealaska. And with that comes also an obligation to go from this very individual viewpoint of me, to a community-based, what is our future? If we can hold you up, individuals like Penny, who are coming onto the scene through advocacy that Sealaska has initiated, if we can lift you up, there's our future. And if you carry that same value down to your baby, to your children, to your relatives, to all of our relatives out there, then we have succeeded in carrying the importance of the values. And I just can't see anything except a ripple effect. I can only see the healing, the good that can come from that. I want to bring up a point that Liz said that really struck me, is that who's better to determine our destiny than us? When we have the ability to take some language that's been used against us, and this happens historically in everything that Natives do, in every avenue, when we have an opportunity to take that language, take it out, and determine what we want to do and how we want to do it, and implement the values that go with it, then I would say we are successful. And I thank my fellow board members for upholding a viewpoint that it's common. We all share it. And so to us, it's a given. It's a given that we have this very cultural, community-based. We all have our babies. I can think of our grandkids and smile so big, thinking, what are they going to do when they get to a place where they fill in our shoes and they become our leaders? So the value is boundless. It's endless. But if we cut ourselves off or allow others to cut us off on who we are, then shame on us. So thank you. I just thank you for the conversation as well, because a lot of times we don't get to be, we're not capable, or there's so much going on that we don't have the ability to express to you the passion that this brings to your directors. And I'm grateful to our board of directors and our communications for allowing us this opportunity. Thank you, Penny. You're doing a super great job. I'm enjoying this. Thank you.
Gnatish, for your responses. Yeah, at the beginning, as I mentioned, I have a 3-month-old, so I'm a little foggy in the brain, and I forgot to introduce that explain that I'm the chair of a shareholder participation committee at the start of this webinar. So, and Nicole mentioned those. If shareholders are not aware, we have 3 shareholder participation committees that were created at the, fall 2019. One that represents the lower 49 states, one that represents Southeast Alaska, and then the one that I'm on and I chair, which represents the rest of Alaska. And so folks apply online at My Sealaska to participate in these committees, and we provide feedback to the board, to the corporation. We learn more about the corporation. We help give a greater voice of shareholders and greater conversation, two-way conversation. And we will be recruiting for some new members for the lower 49 committee and for the Southeast Alaska committee in the summer. So keep your eyes out for that communication on email and on mysealaska.com. Okay, so a final question from me, and then we're going to move to questions from you all who are tuning in. So this is a reminder to put your questions in the chat, and we'll try and address some of those. And this question is addressed to Angela Michaud and Morgan Howard. What does the board want shareholders to know about this resolution?
Thanks, Penny. Guneshish. What the board would like the shareholders to know is we have listened to you, and we have heard the feedback that people want to make sure that our children have a future, that they are involved, and that they don't get disillusioned, and that we will be continuing for another 50, 100 years, that this is the time for the 50-year ANCSA celebration, that this is the time to make these changes. This resolution alleviates the problem of choosing which children should get stocks gifted to them. It allows the elders to keep their stocks so that they can benefit for their whole lifetime having them. And it allows us to continue to have pride and ownership in our corporation, and that you are native enough, you're native enough, even if it's just a drop. Who you are, it's within your DNA. And I'll hand it over to Morgan so we have time for questions.
Thank you, Angela. As you're hearing now, the directors on the board have been very thoughtful about this. And, that is our job, to be thoughtful about the decisions that we make as directors. We are obligated to perform our duties with the values of our culture. One of them that's really strong for me is Hashagun. That one resonates so strongly with me. I think I've always lived it before I even knew it. That's that idea that you take into consideration your ancestors, you take into consideration your descendants, you take into consideration the people around you when you make decisions. You give them equal weight. Now that's an obligation, and it's also an awesome opportunity for us as guidelines to make decisions. This falls right in line with that. In many ways, the answers are in front of you. They're around you. We always bring in our ancestors and our children when we speak, when we talk about important things. There they are, right in front of us. We invoke their names. We invoke our ancestors' names in conversation because we know that brings with them their teachings. That brings with them their names, brings with them the memories and the values, as if they were speaking in the rooms that we're in. We talk about our children because we know we're just one generation out of thousands of generations. It's in many ways, as a board, we're behind the shareholders. We took a survey and 69% were for. Imagine you're in a room of 10 shareholders and 7 out of 10 of them feel strongly about this issue that has not yet been addressed by the board. The idea that we should eliminate the requirement for this blood quantum to be a life estate stockholder, right? 7 out of 10 feel that way. And when we did that survey, which was a very comprehensive survey, it took almost 4,000 shareholders. That's a huge sampling for a survey. Within there, they had written in comments. Those comments were profound. They were urgent. There was urgency in those comments in regards to this issue. They are wondering why. Why are you leaving us out? Why are we not native enough? When will we be native enough? How will we be native enough? They're already learning our languages, saving our languages, right? We need them. They're already practicing our cultures, keeping the things that we value the most alive. They're living in our villages. They want to know, how will I be native enough to qualify? What is the answer you give them? You tell them, well, that's how the government set it up. They came up with that back in 1971. They needed a definition of native. This is what they came up with. It almost feels arbitrary, you know, why that number? As has already been said by Bog and I and Nicole and Giljuice, we have the potential to change things for our organization. We do not need the government to define what is native for us. We can do it ourselves, right? So the board had a very important conversation in November of 2020. And it was only one subject up on that conversation. It was about this issue. And it was a unanimous vote to place this issue before the shareholders. Everyone agreed that this issue should be placed before the shareholders to let them decide. And know this, when Anthony talked about the 7%, and Nicole mentioned only 7% of the current shares owned by shareholders are those under 1/4, and they receive those through gifting inheritance, only 7%. That means when this goes to the shareholder vote, 93% of those voting are not the ones who are going to benefit, right? The 7%, they don't get to decide. Who's going to decide this? It will be the original shareholders, by and large, 93%. And if this vote passes, what does that say? I think it says that Sealaska, like someone said earlier, is not IBM. We're not a typical corporation. We're a vehicle that holds our ancestral land, right? We will always be that entity that does that. That's the shareholder connection through Sealaska to our land. To me, that's so powerful. And that's why we need the next generation. We want to welcome them in and open our arms to them. We don't want them to feel like they're not included because we need them. The next generation is the best equipped to handle the future. We need them. I want them to know they're valued. I want them to know they're loved. So that's why I'm urging all shareholders to vote yes. Thank you, Penny.
Good enough, Chief. We are going to move into the part of the discussion where we are welcoming questions from shareholders who are tuning in. So please, I know there's been some coming in, but keep putting questions in the chat. So the first question is from Clarice Johnson. She says, Sealaska has mentioned mentioned that blood quantum impacts the ability of Alaska Natives to participate in traditional harvesting activities such as sea otters. How would owning Sealaska stock change that for Alaska Natives who are under a quarter blood quantum? And I'm not sure who on the board wants to discuss this, maybe Morgan. This is something that I know Sealaska Heritage Institute has come out and advocated around. It's a federal requirement that the hunting and processing of marine mammals can be done by people who are 1/4 or more Native. And a note that, you know, it makes it hard to credibly object to the federal government using blood quantum as a requirement when it comes to hunting rights if our corporation does. But this is a federal requirement. And maybe Morgan can say more. I see he has his hand raised.
Well, you said a lot of it there. It's the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and the government's following our lead. Basically, they're using our definition that we inherited from the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. So the answer is, if we define ourselves as Native, we will be able to go back to them and say, if this vote passes this year, we'll be able to go back to Congress and say, your definition of Native is wrong. We have a definition of Native now. It's lineal descent, and it's throughout Sealaska. That will give us the opportunity to change that. That's what, and we have Sealaska Heritage Institute, and there are a lot of smart folks there. We have PhDs. We have the ability to make these changes, but we have to let them know how we identify ourselves first. That will be how we'll be able to do that.
Did you have something to add, Cahill Juice? I saw you came off mute, but you're muted again. I think there was some feedback.
Yeah, I wanted to add something, and I really appreciate that question because it points out the technical relationship we have as Native people, whether it's in the corporation, in the tribe, with the agencies. It is complicated. And one of the things I found when I listened to people, they had some of the issues not as clear. Clearly we have our corporate secretaries telling you, this is not directly impacting. But when you determine who you are, you also have that right as a tribe to do those things. It's a step in the right direction. On Friday, there was people sitting on this board, and Sealaska advocated for that change in the legislature with them because with the recognition bill. Now, when you make changes like this, you are telling the state, we define who we are, whether it is in a quasi-Native corporation format, whether it's our tribe, whether it's government to government, we're going to be able to strengthen that. Thank you to those, I want to say a shout out, thank you to those who put in that effort. And so that's another great reason, thank you very much, that will help clarify and allow us to advocate. Joe, our chair for AFN, we have, it gets so complicated that sometimes answers are simple, but other times answers are very complicated. All I can say is this helps us in the fight to represent ourselves in the manner that we choose to represent ourselves without getting too deep in the weeds. So thank you so much for that question.
And Nicole, did you have something to add also on that question?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Penny. And I will keep this brief because it brings to mind another way that opening enrollment to lineal descendancy brings tremendous value to Sealaska. Morgan and Giljuice just touched on it. When we define who we are as Native people, that actually influences policy that impacts us. And something that's it's important to remember too, when we talk with our delegation in Congress and we say our corporation is 23,000 members strong, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, to be able to say, we represent 30,000, 40,000 of your constituents, of people who are voters. That makes a difference when we talk with policymakers. We often work with senators from other states. We'll use Washington State as an example. If you added up Sealaska's shareholders just in Washington State, there was a time when they would have been the fourth largest tribe in the state of Washington, and that matters when you talk about representation and policy. So that's another value to think about when you are looking at this vote. Thank you.
This does not directly affect that issue, but can lead to potential changes of how the federal government allows hunting of marine mammals. Another question, isn't it true that left outs can already enroll, referring to people who were not alive in 1971? Shareholders can gift stocks or will them for their descendants. And then I'll stick in a second question from Shirley Ernest. What about the dilution of dividends paid to our elders who depend on the money? Who wants to jump in?
And I could address that last part. When this issue was first addressed in 2007, the board at that time did take in consideration elders, and they did, and that's where the 100 additional shares come from when you turn 65. So that was put in place to offset that, so that elders could continue to receive dividends. And something that hasn't been said here, and I think it speaks directly to that, is why now in regard to the resolution? Because Sealaska is financially strong. That's why, because we can do it. Meaning that we can continue to provide significant, dollars put into our dividend program. We couldn't have done it at any time in the history of Sealaska, right? But we've had some very strong years. Look back in our past 5 years, and now as a board, we're able to plan and look ahead, and we feel very confident about the future. The next 5 years will be better than the last 5. We know that we can take that pie and make it larger, right? So we're looking at the numbers and we're anticipating for them to be better. Thank you.
Can I add to that, Penny? Can I please add to that, Morgan? Because that goes back to values. And I think about this, and here's how I think about it. What if our grandparents had a choice on this issue? That's not even a question. They wouldn't. Our great-grandparents never. They advocated, fought, and did so much for us for inclusion. And so to even have that mindset about not including is a very non-Indigenous value in thinking about how you're thinking about your future. I just have to add that, because to me it's a no-brainer, but to others weighing it out in terms of dollars, my babies are invaluable. My babies are priceless. And so my future is boundless because of that. And if I'm trying to make it a limit, or I'm making it a right or a wrong, then I lose. So let's make it what it needs to be and advocate. And that's the other thing I didn't say. I support this resolution strongly. I forgot to even say that. So thank you, Penny.
Left out, so she's going to correct that and add some of her comments.
No, that's all right, Penny. Left outs is a class L stock, L for left outs. It's those who were born before 71 who would have been eligible as original shareholders, but who simply missed the opportunity to apply. So it's actually a different class of shares. Descendant stock, which is class D stock, this only applies to descendant shares. So left outs still have to meet that 1/4 blood quantum requirement. Descendants would be lineal, those born after 71. And I just wanted to note that Life estate stock is different than original common stock. That is one of the benefits and one of the powers of original common stock, is that those stocks exist forever. They get gifted, they get inherited, they get passed on. Descendant stock is life estate stock. And that means when you pass away, so do your shares. They literally disappear. They dissolve. They're taken off the books. They're gone. Those shares that somebody once owned that represented them in this corporation, they just go away. So to be able to offer continuing shares to those who come after that is very important, because descendants cannot will or gift their shares. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the next question, although I do see Vicki has her hand up, and Morgan, if you want to make a couple comments.
I just wanted to comment that if you look at the slide that was provided on the impact of the 2007 resolution on dividends, at the April distribution of 2021, the difference was a $245 difference. So for a 1-year period, that difference would be approximately $600. And also, if you look at the statistics, the estimate at 2007 for the enrollment of descendants was 12,500 descendants, and over a 15-year period, 6,300 actually enrolled. And so that dilution occurred over a 15-year period of time. So my point is that the current estimate for this resolution, although the long-term estimate of 17,000 is a high number, there is a current estimate of 8,500, and that number of shareholders will be enrolled over a period of time. So again, the point that I'm trying to make is the dilution is real, but it's a gradual dilution, and that should be something to consider. Thank you.
Just a note that it is 1 o'clock, but we're going to go for maybe 10 more minutes. So those of you online, we want to respect your time if you need to go, but this will be recorded and saved on my Sealaska to view afterward, but we're going to go a little bit longer. And there was a question that you touched on, Vicki, and maybe you can, you or Anthony can answer, from Victorina Mata. When you say you believe it is 17,000, was there an actuary, and what are the research did you rely on to believe that number?
Yes, we are working with an actuary, and we are working with Lincoln Ida, and we are getting as much data as we can gather. And so Plinkett and Haida, which follows lineal descent already, is a great data source, and actually is in my mind better than actuarial estimates, because it's real data as of right now. But we're looking at both, and again, we're going to be cautious. We think that's a cautious number. That number could take 25 to 30 years to reach, but the actuarial analysis plays into that. This one's more complicated. There's birth rates, there's dilution rates that are just not known. So again, the Plinkett and Haida data is very meaningful, and we continue to work with them, and we thank them. We thank Plinkett and Haida for sharing that information with us.
One from Mary Hastings. Have we considered halting, not allowing original shares to be gifted to churches and non-tax-paying entities? It is an issue that I feel needs to be addressed if it hasn't been by now. And can you tell us how much of our original shares actually fall in this category? And then a second question from Ethan Pettigrew. If this passes, will those who were 1/8 or less in 1971 be allowed to apply for enrollment as well?
I can try on is my sound better? Someone was indicating my sound is It's good now? Okay. And sorry, Penny, help me with the first part of the question.
Have we considered halting,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
not allowing original shares
it.
to be gifted to churches
So-
and non-tax paying entities?
Yes, the board tracks that consistently. It's under 5% that have been gifted to non-lineal descents or organizations. And once that occurs, they become non-voting stock. They are not eligible for our programs. The board tracks it just to make sure it's not growing. And so it has been under 5% for many years now. I think if that number started growing, there would be ways to address it. But it is a mix of the necessity to follow state corporate law that allows that
Yeah.
to occur.
Yeah. Penny, can I mention your sound's coming in and out, Anthony, but he's right on the money. He's just saying it's a state chartered corporation. We're held to rules and laws that obviously we're not always liking, and it holds us to a different thing. But I know that's the issue with anyone and everybody. But then I found comfort in that, knowing that they can't vote those shares no matter what. So that what little relief that gave me, it was still better than having them be able to vote in our company and hold a voice. So thank you for that question. And I don't know why I can hear you, Anthony, and then you cut in and out. And so, yeah.
And Penny, I think it's good to clarify that it's only the original stock that could be transferred into non-native hands, through inheritance. The life estate stock is not like that. So the life estate stock cannot move into non-native hands. And that's the stock we're talking about.
And for folks who are not familiar, I mean, this is the idea that you could put in your will that your shares would go to a nonprofit that you care about in your community, and the dividends could go to them. But what is being said is they are not voting members. They're not, they're just receiving the financial benefits, correct?
Correct. And Penny, just to answer the question, it is pretty low. It was below a 4% amount.
If this resolution passes, for those who were 1/8 or less in 1971, would they be allowed to apply for this new enrollment as well?
Penny, I'll just quickly answer that. No, the original standard still applies for those who were born before the cutoff date in 1971, December 18th, 1971.
But they could get the new stock. For life.
No,
No.
It only applies to those who are born after the cutoff date of 1971, descendant stock.
Yeah, everything remains the same for the descendant stock, and the requirement of having to be a descendant of the original shareholder remains the same.
A question from Leilani Wilson Wakush. The corporate message seems to be that original shareholders are not giving or dying fast enough. Can you share statistics? How many still have their full 100 shares, original shares? If this passes, does the board expect any attitude changes between the life estate only shareholders versus those that have original shares, either as an original, inherited, or gifted shareholder?
Can I answer that, please, Penny?
Go ahead.
I think that is a very individual question. I can speak publicly because I can speak for myself, and I've given my shares away to my children a long time ago and retained the shares that my father gave me. And it was just a personal decision that I made. So when I hear people talking about original shareholders, I'm that 7%, I guess, that gave that to my children because I held it in a different way inside of my mind. And so I don't have any kind of feeling or attitude about what value it would bring for life data stock or any, I've never really had that discussion. So I only can speak for myself, but as an original shareholder, this was before I had, feelings about this ever coming down the pipe. But I don't mind because I decided that my children needed inclusion. And so that was the way to do it for me. And that's a personal, individual decision. And that's the first time that I've really heard that phrased that way. So it's something that I will take. And I don't know why it's phrased that way, but I will think about it because I don't want it to be. I want it to be said that as a director myself, it was a very important choice for me to make. And the opportunity to make it was because I was an original shareholder. So I'll think about that, Leilani, and try to understand how that's coming around, and try to have our shareholders understand that, at least from my perspective, I've never heard that type of discussion amongst us as directors. So thank you for that. I appreciate your perspective of us, and it's something that I will take to heart. Thank you.
Morgan?
Yeah, if I could add to it. I'm not sure I understand. I like us just to be shareholders, of the corporation. To me, it's like, how do you divide up your clinkedness or your hidedness? Or when folks talk about the original shareholders, it's such a, who were the people who died before 1971? Were they not original shareholders? I mean, who? I have, as an original shareholder myself, I am no better than any other shareholder. This goes back to kind of my opening statements in that we're just a small sliver of time here, folks. I mean, 10,000 years came before us and 10,000 years will come after us. We're just here now. What I have great grandparents I grew up with, they never got to see the benefits of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, yet they endured much hardship and suffering. I think are they the original shareholders? What would they want? I can't help but think they would say, make sure that you do the best job you can and that this lives on for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. That's all I can come up with, is that it's not about me. It's about the next generation. So the different classifications of shareholders, to me, has a hard time aligning with the values. That's my thought on it. Thank you.
On 11 already in Alaska, and we have many questions that we couldn't address today. So thank you so much for the questions. Thank you to the directors for their time and to Anthony for his presentation. This conversation will be published on mysealaska.com/news, and you can watch it. And a reminder to vote. Hopefully you've received your notice of annual meeting and proxy statement in the mail. You're looking at it. You can also always vote online. The early bird voting deadline is Friday, June 4th, and the final voting deadline is Friday, June 24th. And you can read more on mysealaska.com at the election connection to learn more about this year's election. And just a reminder about the meeting tomorrow, a virtual meeting tomorrow, where more questions will be taken at 5:30 Alaska time, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you, Penny. You did an outstanding job. And Liz wrote a good question. Could you address that before we close? Thank you.
Yeah, Laguna suggested that these unanswered questions be used to create a Q&A to respond to, and putting some of this online. So I think the corporate communications team has recorded all of these questions, and that sounds like a great idea to answer these all and be added to the existing frequently asked questions that are on mysealaska.com.
Penny, shareholders can still reach out to me personally if they want with questions at my email address, morgan.howard@sealaska.com. And all of our email addresses work that way, first name, last name, or just call 907-209-0360. I don't want anyone to feel that questions are unanswered from the directors anyway. Thank you.
Today, and we'll be seeing you all at the meetings coming up, and hopefully all at Celebration in Juneau next month, on virtually or in person also. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Monica.
Finish, Chish.